Hmm. Good morning to everybody. This is my voice is audible to everyone. Hello. My voice is audible to everybody. Hello. Yes, yesterday I was discussing about an executive system. In the first session, we had a discussion on importance of theory of separation. Is it my voice is audible to everybody? Is this my voice is clear? Still. Is this my voice is audible to everybody? Hello. Respond voice.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Voice is clearly.
Good.
Yes, sir.
So as in the last session, we had a discussion on importance of separation of theory that was said by theory of Montesquieu. Is that an eyesight and how power is distributed among the one another and how it is being developed and what is the difference between India and what is the difference between US's power distributions and all of them we have seen. Today we are going to have a discussion. When I said about the separation of power have been done between three organs of government. The first one, making of powers has given to the legislature, which means legislate laws and for national level as well as to the state level too. When it comes to the executive, whatever the laws are being prepared by and legislature, that it shall be done by executive as a implementation responsibility. All of that is given to the thing to the executive department. Similarly, if any checks and balances, okay, like for example, if you see the legislative and as well as to that in executive, if while the implementation of the law, while preparation of the law, any mistakes if it is committed by and both of the organs of the government, that it will be question and checks by the court system, that it shall be called it as a judiciary system. Hope you understand that. So today and yesterday, even I was talking about in a kinds of executive system. We have number of executive systems in India. Okay, we have permanent executive system, we have political executive system, even we have and nominal and eternal. Permanent executive systems we have. So first, we'll try to understand the meaning of in each and everything, so that we'll get in, we'll understand the perfectly about and what is the meaning of the and this and that and all of them. First, let me and explain. Go to the page number, truly in the 66 after unit number 7, that is an executive. Okay. So here in the executive types are single and plural executive, hereditary and elective executive, parliamentary and non-parliamentary executive, political and permanent executive, real and nominal executive. All these types of the executives are comes under the organization and types of executive system in India. Let me explain the meaning of this and executive system. Yesterday I was talking about that. Day before yesterday I told you the meaning of this executive system. Let me explain what is a single and plural executive. Say, for example, if powers are being classified in a single executive system, means the person, and like say, for example, India's Prime Minister, okay, if he can takes out an entire responsibility, or any Prime Minister, presidential of the country, if it is takes it of entire the responsibility of a state, that it shall be treated as a single executive system. There is no point of reason to see the decentralization of the power. Okay, totally power is concentrated in the hands of single person. Okay, you have to remember, once again, I'm repeating the meaning of the single executive. If power is concentrated in a single person or in a single person's hand, that it shall be treated as a single executive system, isn't it? Like, for example, if you ensure that and prompt and energetic administrative action, effective decisions, all those things precise in the single kind of an executive system. Like, for example, and in a parliamentary forms of government, the executive power is mostly controlled by the Prime Minister through his ministers and also part of an executive. So that it also can be given an example of this in single executive system, isn't it? If power is concentrated in a single hand, if it is controlled by entire administrative things of a state, a single hand without decentralizations of its power, and this concentrated power, and it shall be treated as a single executive system. What does it mean, the plural executive system? If a plural executive system means, and if the power it is distributed among more than one. Let's say, for example, if power consists by the two or more executive in any country or in any government, that it shall be treated as an plurality, plural and executive system. If you could see the example of the plural executive system, here you have to remember the power is not concentrated here. Power is distributed among many of them. Like, for example, in a various instances, if you could observe this one, and Greek city states, if you could, observe that Sparta and Athens and all of the cities was a symbol of this plural executive system, isn't it? Here, the plural executive system most probably can treat it under the power is being and distributed among the many of them, and the power will not be concentrated in the hands of the single person. And in order to taking decisions, there are many people who involves into the decision making process. So these kind of the process of decisions can be called it as an plural executive system. Is that clear to everybody? And also at the same time, hereditary and elective executive system. What does it mean? And hereditary and plural executive system here is that. See, within the name itself, we could understand very easily that on the basis of and nature of assumption of an office, if it is happens through the method of, if anybody who comes through the bloodly relation, for example, say Britain, Queen and King. If you see the administrations of the Britain, Queen and Queen, they used to come into the power through the and method of and this executive, with instead of an elective, they used to come into the power as and a kind of an bloodly relation. So if anyone who possesses an executive authority as a bloodly relation, that it shall be treated as an hereditary executive system, isn't it? This and hereditary executive system, the power which it can be received by the executive through the and bloodly relation. I think you can take it as a names of them. Any, dynasties, like say, for example, in the Mughal dynasties, if you could take it as a power one after one, they used to come into the power through the bloodly relations, isn't it? So as, like, for example, King of Bhutan, Jigme Kaisar, Wangchuk, if you take it as an example of this, Bhutan used to give the power by bloodly relations. Similarly, British Queen Elizabeth, Japanese King, all of the countries would be the better example for this. And hereditary kinds of an, executive system in those countries. An elective executive system. Let's say, for example, in an elective executive system, generally the person who comes into the power by elective method. For example, in India, Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, or Manmohan Singh, if you take it, Narendra Modi, all of them, they have come into the power. They are all, executives. And they come through the, method. What kind of method means? Elective executives. That it shall be called it as. If anyone who possesses an authority through the elective method, that it shall be called as an elective and authority. Elected executive system. When it comes to the point of another kind of an executive system, parliamentary executive system, non-parliamentary executive system. See, whenever you see the name parliamentary, okay, this actually which we have derived from UK-based a kind of a government. Okay, we have a copied in our constitution from other nations as parliamentary system. It's nothing but it's a representative system of India, where we can see parliamentary, which is classified into the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Here, who will be called as a parliamentary executive in the sense means this responsible and executive is responsible to the legislature, and the executive is appointed, elected, and controlled by the legislature only. See, for example, member of parliamentarians we see in the parliament in the Lok Sabha. They will not come into the power as in terms of this directly as nominated or hereditary type. They'll come through the, they'll decide the parliamentary executives by the legislature and all the powers which is given to the legislature in order to determine. If any country follows a such kind of the method, that it shall be called it as a parliamentary system. What is the meaning of non-parliamentary executive? Non-parliamentary means the person who do not, I mean, comes or uses powers through the kind of an elective method. Okay, that is such kind of the power which it can be called as a non-parliamentary system. For example, if the executive is independent and need not to be responsible or accountable to the legislature, if any executive system which is far away from the legislative responsibility, if this is not, this shall not comes under the purview of legislative responsibility, it is known as non-parliamentary executive. Generally, in this system, we see that executive powers normally vest with one individual leader, such as a president, or if you can see the commander of the government, we see that. If you take it as an example of the particularly to understand the non-parliamentary executive system, example, American president need not to be responsible. The Congress means he will not, he doesn't show any kind of a responsibility to and taking a decisions of the legislature. But entire the legislative system in the United States of America, which it can be determined by the president. But president will not listen the words and responsible to the legislative. Do you understand that? Similarly, the presidential type of executive is in a countries like, if you see USA, United States of America, Brazil, South Africa, and many of the countries you can see such kind of the responsibilities which it can be held. And that if any authoritarian person, if any executive who do not responsible to the system of this legislature, that it shall be called it as a non-parliamentary. If and the and person who possesses authority or executive authority through the legislature by the appointment and the recruited or elected by the legislature, that it shall be called as a parliamentary kind of government, isn't it? So as US's president is the best example non-parliamentary system, India's president is best example to be called it as an responsible to the legislature as we can consider this one. What does it mean, the political executive system? Isn't it? Here, another type of an executive system, if you could see that, you shall understand very easily the meaning of the what is the political executive and permanent executive. But is this more voice audible to everybody? Do you have any kind of a confusion over? Hello? Okay, fine then. So what is an political executive, permanent executive? Political executive,
Let me treat you.
sorry, political executive and permanent executive. These are all the two types of executive system which we can understand. These two types of the executive systems which we can find out in the administrative process. Do you understand? In the administrative
Yes, sir.
process.
Understand it.
Okay. there's two types of the system which we can see in most of the states. Like say, for example, political executive and permanent executive. The political executive, popularly elected executive who become a minister in the government. Okay. So as if you take it as political executive and permanent executive. These two types of an executives are found in administrations of any government. For example, sometimes it could be a name of a political executive. Sometimes it could be an as a permanent executive. Let's say what is the meaning of the political executive. Popularly, here I mean an executive which is can be elected executive system. Generally, we see they become a ministers in a government. The tenure of them they could have in 5 years or some kind of a tenure which will be fixed further in the political executive, that it shall be defined in the constitutions of the particular country. And those who are elected executive who become a ministers of the government through the elections itself. Okay, if anyone who have a fixed tenure, those who are all called as a political executive. Similarly, for example, if you could take it as Indian Constitution, as fix the tenure of the Prime Minister, as he will be continued as a 5 years of the fixed period as a Prime Minister and the similarly cabinet. So these kind of a system, which we can say the political executive system. As in India, we have a political executive system, isn't it? So as when it comes to the point of this, and what does it mean, the another permanent executive system? Permanent is a word where you need to understand they will not come through any kind of an elective method. They will be into the chair as a permanent. They hold the office permanently till an appointment to retirement. For example, civil services. Okay, civil service and through the candidate who elected through the civil service agency, and the bureaucracy consists of the vast body of officials and employees, and that it shall be comes under the purview of a bureaucratic system, isn't it? One second. As if you could see that permanent executive system, generally it is popularly known as civil services. Bureaucracy consists of the vast body of officials. Generally, they are all kinds of an employees. Those who come through the recruitment to appointment to till their retirement, they will holding the office. There is no point of reason they'll come through the elective method, isn't it? Such kind of a system which it can comes into the purview of a permanent executive system. They come through the test, they come through an interviews, and they elect, they appointed to the interviews and the written examination. For example, in India, if you could see, in the state level, public service commissions, in the national level, Union Public Service Commissions will organize the big recruitment and they will appoint it to them, like such as IAS, IPS, IAS, IFS, and IRS. All other official services of which comes under UPSC bodies, as that they will be into the power till the age of retirement at 60 years of age. So all of them that comes under the purview of this recruit, meant as a permanent executive system. Like say, for example, in India, all of them, the skilled workers, like those who participated in the political policy making process, IAs and IPOs and IRs and all of them, that comes under the purview of this permanent executive system. The another meaning of the real executive system. Let's say, for example, there are the word which you can understand easily, real and nominal executive system. What does it mean real here is that, that it shall be called as a de facto, nominal, de jure, okay? As you might have heard popularly when the time of your reading about functions of President of India. So as the meaning which lays the information here is that the executive of the government can also be classified into the real executive as well as the nominal executive. Nominal executive is nothing but for on the name or and paper if they possess an authority. For example, India's Prime Minister, they have, they possess an authority as nominally. They do not have, they didn't have any kind of an authority to do as an executive system. This is clear. So as in India's perspective, we can call the president could be treated as a nominal executive in India. Those who have a permanent authority and those who are, enjoys the real power, that it shall comes under the real executive. As in India's, if you could take it as in the India's administration, Prime Minister of India to be called it as a real, executive, and nominal executive can be treated as in this President of India. So as generally, we see the different levels of this tenure system which it can be there. As if you could see, there are various methods of choosing the executive different in country-wise. For example, USA follows a one method to choosing the executive, and India follows a certain method to choosing the executive. So there are many methods which we can find sort that. Similarly, on the grounds of hereditary principle, we also and choose the executives on a hereditary principle, direct popular election, indirect election, election by the legislature, and nomination. We follow the certain methods to choosing the executive systems in India. As in the last sessions, which I was trying to tell it to you about, you know, nominal executive, real executive, political executive, permanent executive. Okay, all these are executives which we had. To choosing them, we follow the certain elective method, certain method. And among them, the first method, which it could be called as a hereditary principle. Second method, deductive popular election. Third method could be an indirect election. Fourth, method could be election by the legislature. And the fifth one, we follow the nomination method. While we are appointing or recruiting the authorities, executive system, we follow the certain methods over here, isn't it? So what are the methods to be considered? The first, let us take it as an hereditary principle, isn't it? In a hereditary principle, if you could see that when it comes to the point of an hereditary principle, we follow a method to a certain system. Let me tell you what kind of systems we follows that here. In hereditary principle, will associate it with the monarchical forms of government. Generally, if any state possesses a government as like a monarch, if it is single power, if the single person who is controlling the entire power, that it shall comes under the a kind of an hereditary principle, who actually is an appointed and recruited to people on the grounds of their relatives only. For example, see in a like UK, United Kingdom, Sweden, Spain, Japan, Bhutan, and so on. If you take the names of the countries, we used to see such kind of the method. They used to bring them into the power. Like UK, Queen Elizabeth used to come into the power. That was an only choosing method. Okay, there was an only choosing method as we follow the hereditary principle to bring the executives into the power. Let's say, for example, direct to popular election. Direct to popular election. The best example in India, we see that, like for example, in order to bring the any political executive, in order to bring them in permanent executive, we follow the certain method over here. For example, To bring the prime ministers and to become a prime minister, there is a certain method. The person and should be elected through the constituency, isn't it? For example, in India, before he became a political executive, as in the name of prime minister, who must possess the qualifications to elect it from the any of the constituencies in India. Of course, there should be a nomination method from Rajya Sabha, isn't it? So, as there is also the method we traditionally follow in a, executive system, as the second principle was that an elective method, direct election method. The second one is an indirect election. See, for example, India's president who come through the indirect elections into the power. Like as I have said, President of India was treated to be as a nominal executive in India. However, he is to be treated as an executive. What was the best example for them? How he come into the power? How he will be treated as an executive. He come through the indirect elections. In India, an electoral college, as everybody knows that. In electoral college, there is a method which it can be voted, cast their vote and elect the person. So who will elect to the president election? Directly, not the people here. The common people, he doesn't have any right to cast his vote to the president election. Who will vote that? Who will vote here is that it can the people those elected them. Like for example, MLA, legislative members of the state, legislative members of the parliament, and union territory people. All of them will enjoin into the election. They use their vote and they will elected the president. So we elect the MLS, elected MLS, those who, cast their votes in the, electoral college, they choose the, person. So as we are not directly elected to them, indirect method. So that it shall be comes under the purview of an indirect elections, isn't it? India's president would be the executive system, and he is the executive. He comes through the indirect election method. And also the same time election by the legislature, as we can say another matter, nominated executive. Generally we see during the colonial rule, if you could see that in European powers like Britain and France, Dutch, Portuguese, and other used to be nominate the executive in their dependency countries. For example, say uh, you know Korea, Governor General of Korea was appointed by the Emperor of Japan, if you at the time of Emperor colonial period. Similarly, here in the when India was under the status of colonial time, the most of the Governor Generals and Viceroy General have appointed by the Queen Elizabeth, isn't it? So as the nominations would be the another part to has been the and selected the elected the executive. Similarly, if you see in India's Rajya Sabha system, most probably the Rajya Sabha MPs were treated to be considered as nominated people. They nominated to their position. So nominative executives are changes sometimes is they do not play to the tunes of an appointing an authority, but however they come into the power through the system of a nomination. Okay, so all of them, these kind of the methods we followed. And a tenures, if you could see, means eligibility and tenure system. If you could see, they have their own eligibility in terms of their. They should be citizen of India. They should be fixed for 5 years of a tenure. It can be differ from country to country. Let's say, for example, in United States of America, if you could see the presidents of that, he could be and survive for a fixed 4 years of the time. When it comes to the point of President of France, he will be in the power for fixed time of 7 years. Okay. As in India, if you could see fixed time of 5 years. Similarly, as Canada and Australia, and all of them, they, a concerned Governor General would be and in the power for 5 years of tenure. So as Swiss Federal Council, as if you could see that in the Swiss Federal Council, the governor, the person who would be in the chair for 4 years, isn't it? So all these things which it can comes under the purview of a tenure systems of our executive system, that it shall be different from one another country. India 5 years, France 4 years. Other countries, if you could see, even if you see Swiss federal, and there was an 4 to 5 years. So this could be in a different tenure system. Okay, executive system also is a follows by the fixed tenure system. As the best example in India, if you could take it as Indian president who have 5 years of a fixed tenure to be into the executive systems of India, isn't it? Let's say, for example. And another thing is that when it comes to the point of this and the functions of executive. See, for example, the functions of executive, the functions of executive, it is also differs from one country to another country. Let's say, for example, in a modern times, in a government of modern times, if you could see the drastic, I mean, changes of their responsibility plays a very, very important role immediate after prepared laws by the legislature. Generally, if you could take it as every country has made it an aim to flourish the country as a welfare country, isn't it? The first reason. And the countries have their own, I mean, aims in order to tackle out it. In the process of tackling their aims, there should be a need of more executive system. There should be a need of more help from the executive systems of a nation. As there is, I mean, author named Corey, Corry, Corey is an author's name who observed the meaning of executive system and how the functions are being laid down. The essence of the government as an executive, the legislature, judiciary are merely the instruments for constitutionalizing it. See, for example, if I mean executive, if legislature have made it a law, I'll take your doubts 10 minutes before. I see your text here and I will record it and surely I'll clarify your doubts and before 10 minutes of the session. Is it okay? Uh, you know that generally, if you could see the legislature responsibility, merely it has a right to making of laws, isn't it? When it comes to the point of executive judiciary, merely it has a responsibility, checks and balances of law which are prepared by legislature on all of them. But when it comes to the point of the successful of the government, the survival of the government are to that an accomplishments of the needs of the people, all the responsibility which is lays in the hands of executive only. See, could you imagine without an IAS officer at the district level? You can't imagine. Could you imagine without the police department? Can it be a chance to control the lockdown in the state? Do you imagine that? Say, for example, without an police department in the state, is there any chance to regulate the law and order condition? You can't see that, isn't it? It's a very difficulty for us, isn't it? So similarly, what I mean to say here is that the system is very important, isn't it? One second. The system is very important. Without the system, we can't run the anything at all. Say, for example, making legislature is not important merely. If they should be implemented in the right time, in a right way, that it should be very, very important, isn't it? So as in keeping in view of that, I say the executive system would have a more responsibility rather than judiciary and legislature. That's the reason what I'm trying to tell here is that the Corey observes that. What he observes that that the essence of government is an executive. The legislature and judiciary are merely the instrument for constitutionalizing it. If anything which has been in the Constitution of India, in order to make up, they're only the responsibility which is given to the legislature and judiciary. But anything which it can be related to the working and all of them, that is a very, very important that it can be taken care by the executive. The functions and powers of the executive could classify it into the on a major ground 7 types. One is administrative functions, diplomatic functions, military functions, financial functions, legislative functions, judicially functions, and miscellaneous functions. All these kinds of the functions are to be very, very important in terms of betterment of a nation. See, whole and soul, from a womb to tomb, every responsibility which is taken care by the executive only. What are the functions in administrative? Let's say, for example, executive systems of in India or any other country, there should be a chance, there should be an authority which is given maintenance of law and order in the society. So as in order to they appoint recruit the police officer, they'll give the training and they'll make it and everything to train them, isn't it? If there is no chance of to, I mean, such kind of an executive system, it would be very hurdle to control the things which are related to the, I mean, law and order point of view. Like say, for example, diplomatic function. For example, in India, if you could see how, see sometimes, and despite thinking the country's development, we also need to focus on other countries, like what is happening, how their systems are being following, what are the methods of the welfareistic, I mean, things, and all of them. There should be a need to understand, isn't it? Yes, ma'am. Class unda? Okay. So as that we have discussed, just wait, I'll just give you time. See, there is some network problem. I'll just get back to you. If you wait, please wait, and otherwise join in tomorrow class. Thank you.